Last year I took a look at Xeno Crisis in general, just for the regular systems, but as of late, we are now been given a Game Boy Advance version. But before I get to that, I just want to mention some stuff. Now, last year I actually talked about the modern console and also the Nintendo 64 and GameCube versions, which I do own both Nintendo 64 and GameCube versions in a physical format, but like I was being dumb, I didn't realize the GameCube version had to have a modded system, but thankfully I was given a downloadable ROM and I was able to play it, so basically I could just say and do whatever I want with it. So I got the Nintendo 64 cartridge one, and yeah, so I played both of those, and they're both pretty identical from what I can tell, so there really isn't too much of differences. But the GameCube version, well, the face buttons was the big problem when it comes to aiming. You have to use the C stick in order to do the aiming. But I would just say this, is that they ain't too bad ports. I've already made my own video talking about the game itself. And as a matter of fact, we were also presented a Super Nintendo version, where a lot of people requested it, but the team didn't think it was possible to bring the game to the Super Nintendo, even though we've had Genesis games get ported over to the Super Nintendo, which you'd think they wouldn't know this because it's happened before. But we were thankfully given a Super Nintendo version, and the special versions also came with a cassette tape set, where you can listen to the music in your cassette tapes. So now, it was announced that we will get a Game Boy Advance version, and pretty soon there will be a PS1 version. Yes, a new major PS1 game. Call me crazy. But today I just want to focus on the Game Boy Advance aesthetics, as there is some differences and compromises that is pretty much a lot different than any other version that I have played. And just for the record, I did try out the Genesis version, and it's not too bad. I mean, let's be honest, it's specifically designed for the Genesis, so what do you guys expect me to say? Anyways, Xeno Crisis, you know the story, let's get to the point of the port. Now, the game system has 4 buttons, which you think would be impossible for it to be ported, but we have seen the Neo Geo versions of the game get ported over, like the MVS, AES, and the CD, which, well, let's be honest, both the Game Boy Advance and the Neo Geo have 4 buttons. But both of them control differently. But this one, I just want to mention the specifics here. They got around this by having the roll button to be in 2 separate buttons, A and L. And the fire button is the B button, and the grenade button is the R button. But you can mix and match controls and any like configuration there, but the result's gonna be the same regardless. Now obviously, the voice acting's still intact. I mean, let's be honest, there has been voice acting or voice effects for the Game Boy Advance before, so this isn't the first time we've gotten the game with voiceovers on a portable device such as the Game Boy Advance. I just want to say that the controls are one of the biggest compromises out there, but while you're shooting, when you hold the fire button, you can use the bumpers to pretty much aim your attack, but it's more like you're trying to switch direction. But if it's like inverted look, that could be confusing. I just want to mention that it doesn't show your score while you're playing, and it doesn't show the boss health either. So that's one of the biggest compromises that was given in the game itself. However, the sprites and weapons and everything are still intact. And because of the controls, this makes it one of the harder versions to play. And because of this, there is some camera cramping in the game. So that's basically what I'm trying to say here, is that there's camera cramping in this game. And I will say this, we have gotten Genesis games on the Game Boy Advance, but I will give it credit. It runs better than Sonic Genesis that came out during that point. Funny, isn't it? You can get the game in a physical format or a digital download where you can play in your emulators or maybe your phone now, because Well, Apple allows emulators now, so you can legally actually get the game yourself and just say and do whatever it is that you want to do. I know there's other ways to play the game portably, like the PS Vita and Nintendo Switch. And Steam Deck. Yes, this game also plays on Steam Deck for anyone that wants to know. But I'm going to make a disclaimer right now is that you can only play this on any Game Boy Advance models. That's what the box art in the back says. Now, I don't have a Game Boy Advance player, or just a Game Boy player in general for the GameCube, so I can't test it, and I can't give you guys my feedback if this actually works or not. But like I said, any of the emulators or your physical Game Boy systems do work. The only problem is that when you're playing on a standard Game Boy Advance, it's going to be hard to see because of the screen. But I wish there was an option just to try to brighten it up a little bit. You know how the Super Mario Advance series tries to brighten it up, the game, so you can actually see what you're doing? I just wish they had that option in there, so that way you're able to see it. But the Game Boy Advance SP will give you enough coverage when it comes to seeing what you're doing. And look, I'm just gonna say this right now, just like this base game, or just any other version there is, every level is randomly generated. I just want to make that point so you guys know, because going back in there and trying to say, oh, I know what I'm doing. No, you don't know what you're doing because it's randomly generated, but you get the idea. I also want to point out that the graphics aren't even compressed, neither is the music, so it's basically an identical way I'm playing a game on the Game Boy Advance. It's actually crazy because most of the Game Boy Advance games usually have compromises in terms of music and graphics sometimes, but that depends on the game. So I'm just going to say this for the Game Boy Advance version. Because of the camera cramping, you're going to have to be cautious because the enemies are going to appear out of nowhere sometimes. But if you get the idea where they're going to come from next, you won't have a problem. And yes, you'll still rescue civilians if asking. But of course, the Game Boy Advance version only supports one player. There's no link cable or anything else that's going to be 2 players in this one. So it's only a single player experience, unlike any other version you'll play. So I'll just say this, for those who ever want a new Game Boy Advance game, well, this is a game that I should definitely say you should give it a try. But if you already have played the games of Xeno Crisis any other console and want a new experience, then by all means, give this one a shot. It's not a bad port, which I will just go on to say that it's just more difficult and there were obviously more compromises that had to be made to get this thing running. Glad they got the frame rate and everything all great.